Welcome back to RGO Photo. I'm Chris. Today we're going to test the very budget-friendly Canon 50mm 1.8 and the Nikon 50mm 1.8. This is the AFS Nikkor 50mm 1.8G lens. So this baby is, I think I got 120 in this, and I think I got 88 in the Canon one. So that's roughly a 40% difference in price, but at that low of a price point, it's really just not that much. I've taken these out, I think 3 times now. So we'll take a look at those photos and then we'll put these on the test board as well. So right here, we're gonna do that little faux portrait on the parking meters. And I just kind of want to see, we've got this pine tree that's not that far behind here on the other side of the sidewalk. And then we've got the train and the mountains way in the back, miles away. So I just kind of want to see the background blur, bokeh, out of focus area, what it looks like. We're gonna go wide open. I gotta jump in here real quick because I've had to continue to reshoot this video, especially on the test board. I've discovered a problem with my D600. I believe my mirror in there is tilted ever so slightly. You'll notice in these example photos that I'm going to show up front that it's not in focus really. It's kind of soft compared to the Canon, quite soft compared to the Canon on the focal points. So the other thing that's clued me in on that is when I take a shot of the test board back here and looking through the viewfinder, I've got equal sides test board and then equal amount on each side of the test board so that we can see the test board for barrel distortion and pin cushion. When I get the photo out, it's off to the side. So I'm more on the left edge of the board here and I got plenty on the right over here. But in the viewfinder, it's centered. In the Canon, it's centered. And when I do live view, I can center it and it comes out fine. But when I'm looking through the viewfinder and I center it, it's cockeyed to the right. And additionally, that also makes sense because sometimes if I'm trying to focus on a thin, small object and I put that focal, that center focal point right on it, it doesn't hit the focus. But when I move it over a little bit and get it more like that, it'll hit the focus point. So pretty sure my lens is canted, or the mirror is slightly canted. So what I decided to do was see if I could calibrate the lens, because in some of these example photos you'll see parts of the image are in perfect sharpness. They're great. And so what I noticed was, especially on the flowers, the focal point seems to be back a little bit. So what I did was I started playing with the AF fine tune on this. That's what Nikon calls it on their camera. So that's the spot, the line above the yellow here. So AF fine tune down there. And I've adjusted the value all the way is where I've ended up. I've been playing with it a lot this morning and I ended up at -20 all the way at the end. So I started seeing an improvement at about -10. I was like, man, let me go, and I looked at -12, -16, -18, -20, and kind of 18 to 20 seems to be the sweet spot. Pieces of the image were slightly better than others, and I'm going to do a video showing that because I've also calibrated another lens because of how bad this one was off. I calibrated another lens. It's not off near as much. It's only a -7. I think this is relevant because the example photos I'm going to show you here throughout the video are going to be uncalibrated. So just know that those should be sharper than they are and will be sharper than they are. The test board, I have reshot both cameras, reshot them both, and so that's going to be the calibrated 50mm Nikon against the Canon. So those will be proper, because when you see the example photos, you'll see the Canon is much sharper than the Nikon on the focal points when I'm doing the same photo with each camera. So just throwing that out there, and we'll do a video and show you some of the examples of the calibration I did with this 50mm lens and the 24 to 85 VR G 3.5 to 4.5. So we'll get back to the video now. So here we are. We got the Nikon on the left and the Canon on the right. Zoom in here. Looks like the Canon's got some pretty good sharpness here. Take a look at this highlight. I just barely got it in the Canon over here. But they look very similar in that they're cat-eyed. Pine tree here. Just checking out that background blur. But I think the sun's high enough now that we can go over here, and I think there's a rose bush on the other side of this building that I can get a picture of that I've already done in the previous video. I took that photo probably last year. But if those roses are still over here, we should be able to get a nice thing and check out the foreground blur into the focus, into the background blur. So that's what we're going to do with the two nifty 50s right here, and we're going to do it with the 40mm to check it out, because I probably ought to do a review on that lens. So we're going to again shoot all three cameras on this rose bush. Alright, so here's our rose. Let's zoom in on that. Looks like the Nikon misfocused a little bit, or I misfocused. That's totally feasible. So the Canon's nice and crispy, but you can see back here seems to be a bit more in focus. So maybe I just missed the rose and actually focused back here a little more. But you can also see it on the post. The post is in focus right here, and this post is in focus on this one where you see this little tick mark. So I'm one post off on which one's in focus. But looking at the foreground here between the two, very similar. The bush in the back, I would say the Nikon is maybe a little smoother. This has some kind of jagged edges over here, but this seems kind of smooth. And I think the grass is a little scattered down here versus slightly smoother over here. Pikes Peak in the background. That is a city ordinance that you have to get a shot with Pikes Peak in the background. It's the law. Alright, so we're going to compare the 50mm lenses here on this swing with the 4 chains hanging down with that nice highlights off of them. So better start going because it looks like somebody's coming to the playground. But with one focal length, I think what we'll do is we'll go 1.8, 2.2, 2.8 on each, and so we can check out the highlights and the bokeh and all that kind of stuff. So one thing I noticed putting the 50 on this Nikon, it's like a really hard and awkward feeling. It doesn't feel right, so it just feels like you're doing it wrong, but it goes on. Here we are at 1.8, and Nikon still on the left, Canon still on the right. This is our focus point. This is before calibration. Now, as we go further back on these chains over here, you'll see that the middle portion of the frame, the Canon's pretty round, so is the Nikon. Even as we go back, mostly round, slightly oval on those back 2 chains. But when you go up high, you get those cat eyes on both. And when you get down low, again, you can see the cat eyes on both. But checking out here at 1.8, the background being obliterated, or close to anyway, which one appears better? I almost feel like the Nikon's background is just a little better, maybe just slightly smoother. But let's go to 2.2. Alright, here we are at 2.2. Again, the Nikon on the left, Canon on the right, and if you can't tell, there's like a slight pink pigment over here. This seems to be something my camera is defaulted to, or something along those lines. Can't figure that quite out. But same story at 2.2. The center is now almost perfectly round bokeh balls. Going up high, they're oval but less cat-eyed. Same thing down low. Almost roundish down here, more ovally than cat-eyed. So pretty nice. Again, check out the background. Which one do you think is better? I just feel like this is a little smoother on the Nikon than it is on the Canon in the background. All right, 2.8. Again, focusing there, but check out the bokeh balls in the background. Nice and round, nice and round. You can almost feel like you see the aperture blades in that it's not a perfect round. There's very slight edges around it. They both kind of look like that, almost like a polygon of some sort. The tops have gotten even better, and so has the bottom. Very close to being perfectly round down there. So again, the background at 2.8, not terribly different from 1.8, but again, I feel like I like the Nikon's background a little more. It just seems like this is maybe just slightly harsh on the Canon side, but still very similar between the two. All right, right here what we're going to do is we're going to be slightly off center of facing this sign straight on. So we're going to be more over to my left post. We're going to aim center or focus center, and then because of that slight angle, we're going to be at 1.8 on these 50s, and we're going to see how much focus is lost or how thin the focus band is. So this is the more oblique shot of the sign because the other one really didn't do a whole lot. So I focused right here on the IO, between the IO here. You see the Canon is just sharper, and that the actual focus point on the Nikon is to the right more, which is kind of interesting. I noticed sometimes, like on that chain, that my focused spot in the camera has to be on the left side of the chain. So it's like it's slightly off for some reason. But you can see this front side blurry, goes into some sharp focus, and then boom, the back is a little more blurry. So it's fairly thin plane of focus here right in the middle. Again, background blur. I feel like the Canon's maybe just a little harsher than the Nikon in that top left corner. All right, we're gonna take a shot right here, and we're gonna focus on this guy so that we can kind of shoot through these and then have that background and check it out. We're gonna shoot these 50 millimeters at 2.5 because I've run out of shutter speed for this much daylight. I'm at ISO 100 and 4000 on the shutter speed, and I'm still a good bit overexposed. So we're gonna stop down to 2.5, which is a stop. So hopefully we're not overexposed still. We're still at 4000 on the Canon, 2500 on the Nikon. Here's our focal point. Nice and clear on the Nikon. Nice and clear on the Canon. Check out this little guy back here. Compare the background blur on this guy. These look very similar in the background to me. This is a pergola roof, and so these little spots right here are the shadows cast from the pergola. That's why it has that goofy little bit right there and back here. That's a shadow. Let's check out this guy. We're just off just enough where I can't quite get these to go exactly where I want. Here's a faux portrait shot on this J pipe. Again, Nikon still on the left. And I took this so we got the foreground here on the fence going into the background, and then we can check out the background blur up here. which one of those looks better. They both look very similar to me in this regards. If you go down in here to the fence, you can see here on the Canon, like this area is in real good focus, which I believe is these guys, these two, and the focus is actually back further. This is before calibration. So mountains in the background, bushes. Alright, so here, just wanted to check out this tree in the background. How does that look for out of focus areas? We can look at the flower here. Again, the Canon's nice and sharp over here. Look at this guy. Is either of them better than the other? Alright, another sunflower shot. Here you can see the thin focus depth of field here. The front's blurry. These are in focus, but then the petals back here are out of focus, so you can see in focus petals right across there. And the Canon has the same thing. It's in focus across this middle part. Background's blurry. These are in focus. The front's out of focus. What I found interesting here is that the stem is obviously very well in focus on the Nikon, not so much on the Canon. If you look at those, let's look at this guy. Either of those being in the background look any better zoomed in? They look the same to me. Alright, so here we're looking through some grass to focus in here. And this is our point of focus. It looks just very clear on the Canon. Just take a look at this guy in the back. Take a look at this grass. Either one of those look better. I think the Nikon's background blur is just a little bit better. Look at that grass. See how you got this harshness back here? And it's much smoother over here. I like the Nikon's background blur better. Alright, this was our focal point. So checking out the background back there. Would have been nice if I lined this up a little better. Let's look at the grass. Either of those look better or worse. Again, you see it just looks a little harsh on the Canon side. It just seems smoother on the Nikon side. And obviously the Nikon took this shot and the Canon took this shot. So the Nikon shot the Canon seemingly a little bit blurry. The Canon seemed to do this one a little sharper, but maybe not so much in the front, but through here. So the background, again, very similar, but I think I like the Nikon's background blur just a little bit more. So having reshot these both this morning, what I'm going to do is we're going to do 5 apertures. We only got one focal length, so let's go ahead and do 5 apertures. 1.8 and 2.0, because we want to see, you're buying a 1.8 because you want as big an aperture as you can get, and then we'll stop them down to 2.8, 4.0, and 5.6 in case you're trying to get more depth of field in focus, or more in focus. So let's check these out side by side. Nikon will be on the left, Canon will be on the right, just like they are right now on the table, which is backwards for you. So 1.8 millimeters here, and I've also learned to link these together so a monkey can learn. Look at that, one click and we go now. So Nikon on the left, you can see it's not terrible, but it's not as sharp as the Canon here at 1.8. Go up into the words and you can see the Canon is sharper. Go up into this corner, and I believe the corners are going to be better here on the Nikon. Yeah, I would say the corners are better. This card looks better on the Canon, but I think this looks better on the Nikon. So down here is definitely going to go to the Nikon. Real good The left side is real good on the Nikon. As you can see, beats the Canon handily in the left side, and it's pretty close on the right side, but the center definitely belongs to the Canon. Here we are at f2. Again, not bad on the Nikon, much better than it was before I calibrated, but the Canon is just a bit crisper, especially when you look at those words and you look at that UPC right there, just crisper on the Canon. But the corners, pretty close here. I do think that maybe the Nikon. Down here in the bottom right, definitely the Nikon is a little better. Better down here. And the Nikon is definitely better in that top left as well. Moving on to 2.8. Let's go straight to these words. Now this is really good. It's just the Canon stop down gets even crispier. So this is still really good over here on the Nikon. Way better than it was before the center was being blown out of the water by the Canon. But the Canon's still just sharper over here on the right. Let's go into these corners. The Canon corner has really improved, but I think the Nikon might have as well. I mean, this is a really close corner. Down here it seems like the Nikon may have gone backwards a little in the corner, and the Canon's picking it up a little bit. But again, I feel like this is closer to a tie, but when you look at the card there, the card is better on the Canon. So that bottom right corner is pretty good for the Canon, relative to the Nikon anyway. But this bottom left corner, Nikon's got that real good, and the top left real good. The Canon's getting better and better as we stop down, but the Nikon is still really, really good. And Nikon in the center is not bad, it's just the Canon's getting better as we stop down as well. Alright, here we are at f4, going into the center, and again, the Nikon's not bad over here, it's just the Canon is getting just that much better as we stop down. You can see it's just a bit crisper over here. Now this corner's been pretty close, but it looks like, man, this one's got a little more contrast than this one. Oh, that one's tough to say. Let's go down here. The Canon has picked it up. The Canon's definitely better over here on the UPC and on the card. Definitely. Now this corner's really belong, or this side in general has really belonged to the Nikon. The Canon's picked it up here. It's pretty close down here. I almost feel like the Nikon in the low left has gotten a little worse. Canon, I think, takes this top left now. So as we've stopped down, the Canon's corners have improved, and almost at f4, I almost feel like the Nikon's corners have gone backwards. Alright, 5.6. Again, the Nikon's not bad, but it's not really sharpening up much more, and the Canon's maintaining its sharpness here in the center. Go up to here, and this real much crispier than over here. So go up here in the corner. This corner looks like it got a little better for the Nikon, but also the Canon's cleaned up a bit. Looking up in here, I think the Canon's a bit cleaner. Looks like the Nikon has cleaned up this bottom right corner a bit at 5.6, but not quite as good as the Canon. The Canon's really cleaned this corner up really good from where we started at 1.8. Again, I think the Canon might be better here in this bottom left. The Canon's corners have really improved as we've stopped down. The Nikon's corners were pretty good from the start, especially the top right, top left, bottom left. Here I think the Canon has surpassed on the top left corner. I think it's a little bit cleaner, a little sharper. Let's just take a quick look right here. So quick synopsis, the Canon at the bigger apertures, 1.8, 2.0, is just better in the center, and the Nikon is basically better in all the corners down there. You get to about 2.8 and Canon's still better in the center. Well, Canon's better in the center on this, in this case, the whole time. But then as we get to about 2.8, Canon's corners start to catch up, and by the time we get to 5.6, basically the Canon corners are as good or better than the Nikon, and then since it always has the better center, it's better at that 5.6. But in the larger apertures, your corners are better on the Nikon, but the center is a bit stronger on the Canon. So if you needed the consistency across the frame, probably the Nikon down there at 1.8, 2.0. But if you need that center sharpness on your subject that you're going to have in the middle of the frame, the Canon would be a little better there. So anywho, back to me from previously recording. So that's our two budget 50mm 1.8s from Nikon and Canon. I don't know if I would say one's better than the other. I would say if you held me to the slimmest of margins, I think I like the background blur a little better on the Nikon. With these, I don't know if I would trade one for the other, to be honest. So anyway, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give us that thumbs up. Leave a comment below. Hit that subscribe button down there, and as always, thanks for watching.